45 just did irreparable damage to or irreparable damage to America's standing in the world, and it wasn't an accident. 45 didn't make a mistake in pulling up troops out of northeastern Syria last week. Actually, he did, as many have charged. It's what he has long wanted to do. The mistake was not understanding, and more to the point, not caring about the consequences. 45's fateful phone call with Turkish President Recep Erdogan on October 6, giving him the green light to cross the Syrian border and crush the Kurds without U.S. resistance, did more than any single act has ever done to demolish the post-World War II global order and isolate America from the rest of the world. This again has been 45's goal since he entered the White House. Until recently, one or more of his advisors, Jim Mattis, H.R. McMaster, John Bolton, or General Joseph Dunford, obstructed or dissuaded him from withdrawing. Now all of those advisors are gone, and the replacements lack either the clout or the gumption to push back. 45 may believe that he's doing the right thing, that abandoning the rest of the world's problems will make America great again. He doesn't realize that America's might and wealth depend in large measure on the cooperation it receives from others, either offered or coerced into pursuing its interests around the world. He is also blind to the fact, or loathing to admit, that he is in fact not getting out of the world. On Friday, days after abandoning the Kurdish allies to the Turks and consequently all of Syria to Bashar al-Assad and the Russians, 45 announced that he was sending 1,800 troops to Saudi Arabia, but to 45's mind, there was a big difference in this deployment. Saudi Arabia, at my request, has agreed to pay us for everything we're doing to help them, he told reporters. That's the first we appreciate that. It was as if sending American troops abroad doesn't count as a commitment if taxpayers don't have to pay for it. It was as if 45 were telling the world that the U.S. military is now a mercenary force. It was a message to any country currently hosting American troops, at least in part of at our list, because, say, previous presidents have considered it in U.S. interest to keep troops there, that they should start rethinking their options for how to stay secure. 45 has made a practice of abrogating treaties by filtering on comments and alienating allies, but more than any single act, the betrayal of the Kurds should tell everyone that as long as 45 is squatter and who knows, perhaps beyond, there was no reason to trust the United States in anything or 45 in anything. Western powers, including the United States, have abandoned the Kurds several times over the decades, but 45's act was astonishing, even by that dismal standard. For the past 5 years, the main U.S. mission in Syria has been to destroy the ISIS caliphate. The Kurds provided the most potent fighters and lost 11,000 of them in that battle. The United States lost a mere 8, and then with that mission sort of completed, 45 allowed the Turks to mow down the Syrian Democratic Forces, known as SDF, the Kurdish-led militia that did the bulk of the fighting and dying. It's worth emphasizing over and over that the Turkish invasion wasn't an unforeseen side effect of 45's withdrawal. It was an explicit part of the decision. The official statement that the White House released on October 6 made this clear. By even the most purely self-interested criteria, this was a senseless move. SDF fighters have been guarding 4 detention centers holding more than 10,000 ISIS jihadists or sympathizers. They can't keep guarding the centers while defending themselves from Turks, and in fact, more than 500 of the prisoners have escaped. 45 was aware of this too. Asked by a reporter where the terrorists would go, he replied with an eerie casualness, well, they're going to be escaping to Europe. That's where they went to. They want to go back to their homes. So much for the transatlantic alliance. It was nice while it lasted. Now surprised that even the most loyal Republicans are lambasting him for the withdrawal, 45 is saying that he never intended for Turkey to send in troops and that he is working valiantly with the dumbass Senator Lindsey Graham, his most heartbroken sycophant, to impose sanctions on Erdogan's government. The sanctions will have little, if any, effect, and certainly not quickly enough to matter, except to show even authoritarian leaders who make detestable deals with 45 that they can't trust him to keep his words with them either. Meanwhile, the big winner of this transaction, besides Erdogan, is Russian President Vladimir Putin. As recently as last year, Russia seemed not triumphant but trapped inside Syria. Its troops were coming under fire from militias. Its planes were getting shot down. Its one-armed confrontation from U.S. forces proved disastrous. Iran seemed to be emerging as Assad's main ally. But now Russia is the major outside power, not just in Syria, but increasingly in the region. When the Kurds came under fire from Turkey and realized the United States would not respond, they did the only thing they could do to avoid annihilation, turn to the Russians. who engineered a deal that let Assad's army take control of northern Syria for the first time in years, while, at least for now, providing a protection zone for the remaining Kurds. As a nifty follow-up, on Monday, Putin arrived in Saudi Arabia for his first visit in more than a decade. His itinerary also includes the UAE to discuss investment opportunities and the role Moscow might mediate in tensions between the Sunni Arab countries and Iran. In one sense, and 45 was probably thinking along these lines, this might be for the best. The Middle East is a mess. If Putin and Assad could solve it, fine, and if they can't, that's we're out of there. But in another sense, this sort of thinking is delusional. First, we're not getting out of it. Second, the rest of the world is watching, especially with all the other troubled aspects of its relationship with 45 just now. Ukraine must be thinking the wisdom of relying on the United States for assistance. The eastern nations of NATO, especially the Baltics, would have good reason to look elsewhere for security guarantees already traditional U.S. Allies in Europe and Asia are exploring agreements on security and trade outside of Washington's orbit. One big question emerges from this vacuum: what is the U.S. foreign policy, and what are Americans' interests? Not as some idealized or historical concept, but as they actually exist right now. I don't know. Nobody knows. Certainly, our allies and adversaries don't know. Strategic ambiguity is one thing. What we're now seeing is a deep black hole. To the extent 45 has foreign policies, they seem to be driven by one of three desires: to enrich his family's financial holdings, to appease authoritarians who push his buttons by praising his wisdom, and to demolish the diplomatic triumphs of his predecessors, especially Obama. Everything else, straightening alliances, preserving democracy or human rights, even the real politic gamesmanship of international politics is secondary, if not relevant. A question that allies might be asking themselves right now: has 45 accomplished anything in the realm of foreign policy that has directly served the security interests of the United States? No, it's not. It's a stumper, and that's disturbing. So basically he's doing damage, and of course his inbred trailer park supporters won't basically admit it, that he's destroying the country. And that's one thing they're gonna have to live with. They're gonna have to live with the fact that he's destroying the country, and that you voted for this dumbass. And now you're gonna have to face the consequences on it for the inbred supporters that supported him.